COVID-19 cases in South Africa are on the rise once again. Over 21,000 new infections have been recorded, with Gauteng accounting for almost 13,000 cases. So is government struggling to keep up? Well, there's been numerous calls from private sector to help with the vaccine rollout on a greater scale. Let's discuss this further with Business for South Africa's Martin Kingston. Mr. Kingston, thank you so much for making time. I really appreciate your time on ENCA this afternoon. What do you think of government's rollout plan so far? There are so many calls being made by the private sector saying, allow us to also distribute. What difference do you think that would make on our rollout plan?
Well, good afternoon, Clement, to you and your viewers. I think the private sector is already heavily involved with the government. It takes time to ramp up the rollout plan. If you think about it, we started phase 2 for the over 60s on the 17th of May, that's 6 weeks ago. Then we were administering 30,000 jabs a day. Now we're administering, when I say we, the country as a whole, including the private sector, 120,000 jabs a day. We'll be at 150,000, we think, by the end of next week, and we hope to be at 250,000 by the end of the month. The President would like us to get to 300,000 jabs a day. The reality is that we've already got some 700 sites up and running. We've had a constraint on the vaccine supply. That's clearing now. We've got some 4.8 million vaccines in the country, so we can ramp up as quickly as practically possible. We've got to take all of those sites, whether they're public or private, a pharmacy, a workplace site, a private hospital, a doctor's clinic, through a complex process of accreditation. So making sure that they're curated, that they're registered, that they're licensed, that they have the standard operating procedures that they know how to put in place. That takes about 2 weeks. We're trying to accelerate that with government so that we can bring as many workplace sites as possible on stream. I suspect that we will be having a very different conversation in 3 or 4 weeks' time. As I said, the vaccine constraints that we've suffered as a country really hasn't helped so far.
Yeah, let's hope we're going to have a different conversation. As we see more and more people dying, you just realize how significant the speed up of that vaccination rollout plan is. And I suppose allowing those companies to roll out their own vaccines will help speed up the program. Now, the DA, Mr. Kingston, has already written to vaccine suppliers. They're asking them to consider, in fact, working with private companies. They want those companies to consider entering agreements with private entities and provincial governments so that the rollout can be sped up. But those suppliers, even if they are keen, there are still limitations, right? Because the rollout is the competence of the national government.
Okay, so let's talk about that, Clement. It's a very good question. First of all, there's only 2 vaccines currently that are accredited in South Africa by SAHPRA. One, of course, is J&J, and the other is Pfizer. There's a process of accrediting others. That takes time. They're trying to accelerate it as quickly as possible. The second is the manufacturers want to contract with sovereign governments. That's what they're doing around the world. It's what they're doing here. One of their conditions is that the government puts in place a so-called no-fault compensation fund. If something should go wrong, they can have recourse, the vaccine manufacturers, effectively to the government concerned. The third is that to do something on this scale, we need to have a fully coordinated and integrated plan. We can't have individual companies or individual provinces actually doing something that is independent from the country as a whole. Even the transportation of the vaccine from the central depots to ultimately the sites needs to be carefully controlled. Obviously, there's a cold chain aspect of it, but in addition to that, there's a security aspect. Every single one of these deliveries is being accompanied by security to ensure that it reaches its ultimate destination. Now, to do that in a fragmented way, we think, and government certainly is of the view, would not be in the best interest of the country. What we need to do, and you've already made this point, particularly in the face of the third wave, it looks like a very ugly third wave, is to vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible across the country, but we need to do that systematically.
And, I mean, the fact that you've got private entities coming and saying, allow us to help you speed up the process, the fact that you've got political parties also writing to these suppliers, that must indicate that the government is really failing.
I think that there is frustration and anxiety, and that's understandable. We all recognize that. We've got about 145 so-called workplace sites that are already in the system. 10 of them are operational. Impala Platinum, for example, the Ford assembly plant, Sanlam and Old Mutual, all of them are now fully up and running and operational. They had to go through the self-same process that I was talking about, ultimately resulting in registration and licensing. I think that we need, again, to recognize that there's no manufacturer that's going to sell independently of the government. If we as a sovereign country are not able to negotiate more aggressive delivery schedules with the likes of Pfizer and J&J, why would an individual company or indeed a province be able to do better? I don't think that's realistic. And the reality is that we're in a constrained environment, not just in South Africa. We just need to turn on our television sets to see that those constraints apply elsewhere in the world. So we need to make sure that the vaccines that we've now received access to, and as I said, the supply has ramped up very significantly, can be effectively put into people's arms as quickly as possible, starting with those who are most vulnerable, that's those who are over 60. We've now opened up to the over 50s, over 300,000 people registered in the first 24 hours. A significant number of them have already been vaccinated, despite the fact that the government was going to hold that off. So I think that we're trying to unlock any constraints and bottlenecks in the system, but we need to do so in a responsible and thoughtful manner.